Greetings, friends. It's been about 2 years since the first protest against lockdowns gathered at Queen's Park, Toronto, Ontario, in front of the Legislative Building. And that would have been, I think, around April 27th, 2020. This Saturday, today, is April 30th, and I went to yet another gathering at Queen's Park, although it's now gathers at the north end, where the original protest would have been at the southern end of the park. And I was curious to see, like, where is the movement now? Where is the freedom movement now? Do those Yahoos still gather at Queen's Park? And I would know, of course. That's a rhetorical question. I've still been going. I was a regular, more or less from the beginning, from May 2nd, 2020. I went to the first one. But since that time, I went pretty consistently for a year and a half. So I stopped going frequently in the last half year, 7 to 8 months, because it really started to get old in many ways. The movement didn't gather increasing numbers of the Canadian public. It did build sympathy, it did form bonds and establish new networks of connections, hopefully. Yeah, in many regards it did, but it never, of course, took on the majority of Canadians being sympathetic. At most, majority of Canadians, which are many different ethnic groups, many immigrants, and divided in many ways, but it never really gained their sympathy. They remained mostly indifferent. We did gain some sympathy from some of the public, and we saw this at a climax with the trucker convoy, which was in late January and stretching into February of this year. And of course, that's in Ottawa. I'm sort of focusing on Queen's Park, Toronto. That's the perspective I've been most familiar with. But it's all part of the similar movement against these forms of tyranny, the medical tyranny involving lockdowns, and later the mandates for the stabbies, and also, of course, issues to do with the face mask, although that was never, I don't think, really the single issue. That was how the establishment painted the protesters. They called them anti-maskers. Later, they called them anti-vaxxers. But this is, of course, a distraction from the fact of the matter is the government is being tyrannical, and I mean, even the idea of requiring you to stay at home for 2 weeks at a time based on the abstract results of some random test, or preventing you from leaving the country if you desire to do so, preventing you from seeing loved ones, even having funerals, shutting down businesses, all sorts of other things. You could pick any of those as your single most worst issue that motivated you to come out. But certainly the stabby mandate was a huge, huge issue and continues to be an issue. And that's the thing. Since the trucker convoy, which was recently, only a few months ago, what have we learned? Well, we've learned that the government will shut you down, unsurprisingly. I mean, I think we knew that was going to happen. I don't say that the convoy should not have happened for that reason, but that's unsurprising. We also learned that the banks will shut you down. That shouldn't be surprising based on what we've seen going on in the United States, but maybe that was a surprise for some normies. If you know what I mean, like, not all the normies would join us, but some of those people that still trust in the government or at least trust in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, those kinds of people, they might trust in law enforcement. I mean, no. Did the law enforcement come to our side? No. They moved in cops from different parts of the country. I don't know. They said there were foreigners in the cops too, but we're halfway there anyways, if you know what I mean. So the mandates are still kind of there. There have been a lot of loosening of restrictions. I mean, I can say life is much nicer now that I don't have to worry about wearing a mask in most stores. It's in many ways life is better now, but have these restrictions really gone away? Not exactly. A lot of it is just moved into the private sphere, the decisions of employers as to what they require of their employees, and that just differs from place to place. But generally, things are better now, but many people have still lost their jobs during the pandemic for reasons of abstaining from these medical procedures, and they haven't been granted their jobs back. A lot of them have lost benefits or lost maybe things that would contribute to their economic future, they've lost out for things that happened during the pandemic that they can't get back now. The specter of further mandates is constantly over our head, whether that could be mask mandates, lockdowns, injection mandates, who knows what other kind of mandate. All in the invasive nature of invading your bodily sovereignty, that specter continues to hang over our head, and that we know that, and we a small number of people continue to gather at Queen's Park, which will be the focus, is what I'm talking about from my perspective in Toronto, even though we never we never caused as much of a stir as the trucker convoy, even though we were doing it way before the trucker convoy. Why haven't we ever gathered more people? And part of it's just the nature of Toronto, the nature of the city. The people here are not going to be the majority of the people coming out for these so-called freedom movement, or the freedom, the resistance, whatever you want to call it. In a big city, the population is much more docile, much more divided ethnically, much more indifferent, if not outright hostile. So those people are going to come from out of town, but we weren't able to really get enough people long term. We had huge turnouts numerous times. We had 10,000 plus people a handful of times. Maybe one time we had 20,000, even 30,000. It's hard to say. We had a few big turnouts over the years. But now we're getting into spring. We're getting into the warmer part of the year, halfway through spring. And now you'd expect it's easier for people to come out. And we're not seeing that at Queen's Park. Just like for over a year now, it's hovered around 70 to 100 people. And I should say that the trucker convoy probably did lead to some positive changes. It resulted in political pressure, which coincided with the easing of many important restrictions, like vaccine mandates on the part of the government, at least in places like Alberta. Ontario lagged behind. So I don't mean to say the trucker convoy didn't accomplish anything. I always think it's good to make a show of force, build networks, build friendships, show other people that there is hope, and you do gain people and you do get your word across. But in terms of strategically winning the war, it might help, but we can also see these giant obstacles that are just thrown at us. I don't think that's an excuse not to ever use this means of protesting, but it should cause us some pause for thought in terms of how we approach these things. And at least if you're going to protest, what is going to work? What the truckers did worked. That caused a huge shock to the government, and that is not a bad thing. Even though you say, oh, they're going to react against you with harsh measures, which they have. But even then, it's not a bad thing to shock the government, because they look down on you. They look down on you and I completely. They view you as completely beneath them. It's not good that it's a good thing that they had to think twice about what they were doing, even though they invoked the emergency measure, which they rescinded like about a week later. Justin Trudeau being completely weak, but also callous leader who you shouldn't underestimate. Trudeau for probably would sentence you to some very dark and terrible things if he was in a position to do so. This man is not a strong leader, but don't underestimate the callous nature that is lurking in that man. So who really gathers these days at Queen's Park? That was kind of the main thing I wanted to address in this video. And like I said, it's pathetically small. 70 people, 100 people, maybe 200 people here and there. It's always hovered around that number. And to be honest, I still go, right? Because I know some people, but as I was saying, I don't go frequently. But most of those people are Yahoos. Doug Ford, our premier, was calling us Yahoos derogatorily, but we can say Yahoos, like people from outside the city who may be more simple and good people, but maybe not the most intellectual types of people. But there's those people. And then honestly a lot of kooks, weirdos, freaks, and party goers, or party animals even. And This goes along with the music crowd. They have the DJ there, loud music, techno music sometimes, or different kinds of music, not very good quality music and too loud a lot of the time. And the DJ stays there playing this music by the King Edward VII statue at the north end of Queen's Park when the march has left, and it'll be a pathetically small number of people marching. So small that it's really like, why would you want to go on this march? It's embarrassing. But while they're gone, he'll still be playing the loud music in the park, so you're really imposing yourself onto a lot of people. The march will still go in the roadway and block traffic, and even though it's not a lot of people. And I guess other groups, there's seven, a gazillion other groups probably protesting in Toronto too, and maybe they do the similar thing. But it's not a good look. I'm just saying from the perspective of, like, you want to win the normies to your side. Maybe you can't win them to your side, but at least can you be more mature about it? Maybe you would at least attract better quality people. I just think that this kind of show of the party atmosphere hasn't helped us. And then, of course, the bickering between our self-appointed leaders like Kellyanne Wolf, toxic, bickering with Lamont Daigle, who is not a great guy. I mean, I've seen how he is, and it's just he like narcissistic, big egos, and just all the drama and politics, and then taking that stuff up into the public sphere on the microphone and talking about himself, or bickering with people during public speaking, like back and forth. Like, not that I really ever paid that much attention to the speakers, because it's all stuff I've heard before, and then just a lot of kooky stuff. Like, there was a guy talking about natural law today, but loosely there is a Christian presence there, which is good, even though it is very watered down and misguided. But there is that presence there. I think many of the people who might have been here today went to probably Ottawa to see what was going on with this biker convoy, and that's I should have said at the beginning, like, I don't know what's going to come of this biker convoy in Ottawa. So maybe we'll see what happens. But the main idea is that because there's been at least some easing of restrictions, you don't get the masses of people being motivated. In a nutshell, that's what's going on. They're just not they never have been motivated enough anyways. And quite frankly, Canada deserves to be locked down again. Like, we all deserve, even though some of us have fought against these things, and maybe in that sense we don't deserve it, but collectively as a people, although a divided people, but we all share in some of the blame, and how we've gotten here, and how we obeyed everything they told us to do. Why should we deserve any freedom? And I'm cynical about the concept of freedom itself, but in this context of, like, freedom from lockdowns, freedom from mandatory injections, freedom from mask mandates, do the majority of Canadians deserve not to have that imposed on them? Quite frankly, no. And the children don't deserve it, but anyone that can make a rational decision, which is increasingly few people these days, but anyone who can think for themselves or would profess to do so, but then you see them going along and obeying, if they've obeyed everything that's happened, then why would you really deserve to not have these things imposed on you again in the future? And I was saying earlier that I thought there's going to be more lockdowns coming in the fall. We'll see. I still think it's quite likely. I don't know what's going to happen, but we don't deserve to have this freedom, and that's why there's an unsettled feeling, because it's like basically the resistance is, again, more or less has no heartbeat right now. It's like brain dead, or no, it's not that. Obviously, like I was saying, there's stuff still going on in Ottawa right now, and we'll see what resuscitates. Things could resuscitate, and they probably will at some point. But at the same time, this is different now. Things have changed. I don't recognize a lot of the same faces. A lot of people have moved on. Some people have been turned off by all the immaturity I was mentioning. The party atmosphere, the freaks, the kooks, the weirdos, who are really, if that's all you have coming by anymore, that's just a very sorry state. And you can call me a kook or a weirdo. You can call me, I'm not a party goer. I don't think I'm a Yahoo, but you can call me a weirdo or a kook, but I hang out and I have interesting conversations, and I know some people there. That's why I still like to come. But I know That, this is one reason why I never would volunteer to do a speaking, like, publicly. I wouldn't have ever volunteered for that. I'm already associated with a bunch of kooks and weirdos, but I don't need to make it even more obvious. So, and we never had enough of a unifying foundational narrative. Like I said, there's some of the Christian message sprinkled in here and there, but then there's anything else that goes, like some guy talking about natural law, some New Age stuff, whatever. It's not enough. It's not enough, and we come from different places in the city. We come from outside the city. We don't all come from the same background. It's difficult enough. We don't have any other thing tying us together other than maybe our own personalities and how we don't like to be, living under communist medical tyranny. Other than that's not enough, though. You need something binding you together. You need that, and we don't have that. And we had no effective discipline, no management of how our message reaches the public. We're often nasty to the public, to be honest. We're pretty nice to the public overall, generally. But I've seen how people sometimes behave on marches, and they just feel superior to the stupid normies. But then you're just a different kind of annoying person. So, and this lack of management and lack of any effective leadership, and of course we've been constantly beset by divisions and a lack of a common. We've had a common message, but it's different stuff going on at the edges and clouding the message, like Lamont getting associated with the indigenous land rights movement, which quite frankly at times is just anti-white, really, or anti-Canadian, what traditionally Canada was. You're getting associated with distractions, just talking about chemtrails, talking about flat earth, talking about issues. At some point you lack a unity of message, and that doesn't help you. And we are easily open to an intrusion by subversive agents. There probably have been a number of those people, and just so all the good quality people you'd hope to attract, I think they were turned off long ago, and they just moved on, because so many people have come and gone through Queen's Park. Thousands of people have protested there out of Canada, obviously most of them in southern Ontario, but how many of them have remained? Less than 3% have remained. Probably less than 1 or 2% have remained consistently to come there. And I wouldn't fault them for that. I would not fault them for that. So hopefully we can learn from this. I don't mean this to be a cynical or negative video. I do believe actually we have woken up a lot of people. And that's going to continue happening slowly. But unfortunately, society is polarizing so fast that the people who are not sympathetic to us are also, they're not. Ultimately, a mass of them is never going to be persuaded one way or the other. They're going to go with what they're told, what the government's telling them. And maybe that's just the nature of people, but if the government is acting towards evil ends, then unfortunately this mass of people will obey towards evil ends. So in summary, it seems that the freedom movement, if I could call it that, has stagnated. It has, and this is mostly due to the easing of restrictions, which just removes that motivation, and we shouldn't have needed that motivation. We should have been motivated from the beginning, but without that real hard restrictions, even though many restrictions are still here, there's still this gray cloud of many things you can't do or things you wonder about. Like, what is the travel situation? What is the situation with banks? What can I do in this situation? A lot of that still remains, but obviously because many of the main restrictions, mask mandates, a lot of the vax stuff, a lot of that is lockdowns are obviously over. So at least for the time being, because that is being removed, there's just not the motivation to bring out the thousands of people, and that's too bad. And that's why we probably deserve to be locked down again. And we drove people away by this bickering, by this party atmosphere. This bickering, this immaturity has driven away a lot of people, and we should face up to that. So, is it worth going to Queen's Park still? Now, for other protests in Canada, I won't comment. I won't comment on Ottawa and all that stuff. But in terms of the Queen's Park stuff, is it really worth it to go there if you're someone who hasn't been already involved in that? and you don't know anyone there, and you want to see things move forward, I mean, probably there's not much benefit in going. And I don't mean to be against what we're doing. You know, I've been part of that movement from the beginning. But just to be honest, like, there's probably other things you could be doing, and you could benefit maybe from networking. So there could be some benefit to be going there. But in terms of, as an effective protest, to have an effect on the public at large, these things are pathetic and ineffective at best. Hasta luego, amigos.